Now, these are the declassified robots. I've talked to Marine Corps armorers and others in development. They say they can't get into it, but yes, it's much more advanced. Just like they had it for 25 years, the B-2 bomber, and they rolled it out in 87. So they'd had it since the late 60s. And they already have had swords. In fact, Google that, swords used in Fallujah with machine guns and grenade launchers, and they admit they plan to use these against the citizenry. And that's why the globalists want these systems, because they can have robotic aircraft, robotic drones, robotic predators, robotic reapers, AI systems, AI combat robots that will kill and can be delivered by robotic troop ships themselves or robotically dropped with parachutes, and then the elite can launch whole military operations without having to have troops follow the orders. Like a General Fox Fallon says no to Bush on attacking Iran, they can launch drone attacks on Iran. Skynet is not something out of the movie Terminator. The Pentagon has called the system Skynet. We'll be right back.
Weight 245, kind of broad.
I remember when I first got on the air 13, 14 years ago, people sending me documents and books and materials about Patton being murdered. And now they've got government documents. They've got proof. If you Google General Patton murdered by CIA, you get the Sunday Express, you get the London Telegraph, you get mainstream news. And the guy that really ferreted out all these latest documents to prove this and why they did it joins us now, Robert Wilcox, author of Target Patton, the plot to assassinate General George Patton. Since he was on earlier in the year, I think it was January, it's now gotten a lot of attention. And people say, well, this happened 60 years ago. Why does it matter? It shows you who runs our government, who runs our country. And for police and military out there to know that all of you are expendable too. And the people running our nation wrap themselves in the flag. Patton didn't want to give Germany to the Soviets. He didn't like putting millions of Germans in camps or, more importantly, U.S. troops. This is on record. That were grabbed out of Germans' prisoner of war camps, and tens of thousands, and the U.S. military just said, keep them. Yeah, Joe, they're a present to you. That's what they think of you. So this is on record, and so to recap what happened to Patton, the documents, what's coming out, what the family's saying, and where this is going, is the author of Target Patton, Robert Wilcox. Robert, good to have you on with us today.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me back.
You bet. It's a quick segment now, long segment coming up. But, I mean, tell folks in a nutshell about the book and the aftermath of these documents and materials coming out now.
Well, Patton, I think I could go before a grand jury and get an indictment. But, talk motive first. He wanted to fight the Russians. He was livid, like you said, about all of the POWs that were left there. He just didn't think it was right that we should liberate from the Nazis and then give it to the Russians. And he also knew secrets that would have taken down some of the great potentates of our lives. Eisenhower, for instance, a great diplomat, but a terrible war fighter. The war could have been over maybe in September of 44. Think of the lives that would have been saved if they'd have let Patton go. But they didn't.
The globalists wanted the Cold War. Continue.
They didn't want him to go on, and you know he was a guy like you never see today. A guy who believed things and said them and stood on principle. And he wanted to go and fight the Russians, and they weren't going to let it happen because at that time the American government was big buddies with the Russians, and it's even worse.
Uncle
than that.
Joe Stalin, who'd killed 60 million of his own people. Uncle Joe.
Uncle Joe, that's what FDR used to call him. And, FDR was convinced that Stalin was a great man, that Russia was a great country, and that they were needed to keep the world a better place after the war. And so that in a nutshell, those two are the biggest reasons. He wanted to fight the Russians, and he was going to tell secrets about people that would have stopped them cold from
Wasn't the last straw from reading your book, but previously also looking into it, that he said, I'm going to talk about how our POWs are in the Russian hands, and they said, that's it, kill him.
Well, I can't say that, Alex. I can't say. All I can tell you is that while Bill Donovan, and what the book does is I found eyewitnesses. The man who says that he staged the accident that eventually ended in Patton's death. Douglas Posada was an assassin for the OSS. And he had a meeting with Wild Bill Donovan, who was the head of the OSS. And Wild Bill Donovan didn't report to anyone except for the president and possibly the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And there were a series of meetings, and this thing started off with a stop Patton, which is a matter of record. They stole his gas, preventing him from going into Germany and ending the war earlier. But after the war, when they used him to win the war, then they had a meeting with Patton. Actually, only one man, Donovan did. And I've gotten Posada's diaries, as well as interviewing him before he died. And basically at that meeting, they said, look, we have this great general. He's done great things for us, but now he's threatening to ruin everything. And you've got to stop him, Douglas. And Douglas said, what do you mean, sir? And he said, well, you do what you have to do. And Douglas said, you mean kill him? Yes, you do what you have to do. And this is after about 8 meetings that progressed from stop Patton, which they did by taking his gas and not allowing him to end the war when he really could have done so, and the Germans will tell you so. This was at the point where he roared through France, and he put the Germans in disarray. And at that point, they'll tell you, they could have been defeated. All of their armies were streaming back into Germany, and he knew it, and he could have killed them. He could have stopped them. But,
yeah, he had their main force cut off on the Western Front. He'd done a flank on them. But God forbid that. You got to give it to the Soviets. They've got to set up East Germany.
Absolutely.
You know, the social control freaks, the bureaucrats that have to have control, so they give it to their bureaucratic buddy, Uncle Joe. Stay there.